Shot and killed outside his old Louisville apartment. Police say his car was then stolen.
Ashton Nally faces federal carjacking charges.
Police report said the pickup truck he was driving was stolen. He was robbed at gunpoint, told to lie down right about here on the ground.
2 men are now facing federal indictments in connection to carjackings last year.
It's affecting the entire metro area.
I just asked why.
Illinois is showing stolen out of Louisville Metro.
It's whodunit investigations.
Basically opened fire on him in the foyer of his house to get his car keys.
We're not going away.
The city of Louisville is in crisis. Homicides are up, robberies are up, assaults are up. So what's changed? Well, it turns out there's a catalyst before many of these crimes are happening. Louisville, Kentucky. We're a proud city, home of the Louisville Slugger, the Kentucky Derby, dubbed the gateway to the South. We declared ourselves a compassionate city. We're supposed to take care of each other, not just helping, but fighting to fix the severe wrongs, fighting for justice, equity, respect. How can we call this city a compassionate city as violent crime continues to outpace the previous years? At the root of some of these crimes, an act of violence on the rise, carjackings. They can approach you while your car's running in your driveway. Maybe you're getting ready to leave for work, or you might just be stopped at a red light, checking your phone or changing the song when you hear the sound of a gun barrel tap on your window. Sometimes you hand off your keys, your wallet, your phone, and it's over. But often, it's violent.
Obviously, it's a hurdle for anyone who gets a gun or a knife put in their face. Their life threatened.
This is different from a car theft when you're not in your car and it's taken. This is personal. Headline after headline describes crashes, homicides, robberies, assaults, so many of them involving a stolen car or criminals accused of carjacking.
Of Jefferson County Sheriff's Deputy Brandon Shirley.
An arrest has been made in the carjacking that led to the shooting death of social justice leader Travis Nagdy.
Killed in a crash last night on Dixie Highway. Her name is Madeline Trout, and she was just 17 years old. 26-year-old Austin Fitzpatrick of Louisville was shot and killed outside his old Louisville apartment.
What happens when the criminal who stole the car doesn't stop there? The car continues. Maybe it causes a fatal crash, used in a robbery, or even worse, the car is used in a homicide. Criminals use your car in a drive-by shooting or take it to their victim's home. Another hurdle for detectives to work through in their investigations when the plates don't match the suspects.
It's an awesome son.
Austin Fitzpatrick is a Louisvillian.
Loved the outdoors, loved animals, a little bit of a free spirit. I mean, he would come down to the lake and he would take a kayak out. He may be gone 4 hours.
Creative, talented artist, outdoorsman.
And he would just camp out on one of the islands down at Lake Nolan and just put a hammock up in a tree and hang out.
He's kind, he's loving, he's supportive. Austin Fitzpatrick was compassionate.
He was that person who's very spontaneous. If a friend called and another stayed over and needed something, and he would drop everything and just go. That's just the way he was. He was that kind of person. He would go and help anybody in need, anytime, so very adventurous.
His sense of adventure took him to the Red River Gorge to do some camping with his girlfriend mid-November of 2020.
I'll never forget it. Austin was killed roughly between 1:30, 2:30 in the morning. He had just decided he was going to go home and check on his cat, and that's when he was apparently ambushed. There was a witness across the street, supposedly that did see some things. It sounded like he fought him, and he had all his camping gear, in his hands, walking towards his house, and they just basically opened fire on him in the foyer of his house to get his car keys, and then they rolled off in his car and wrecked it within probably 4 or 5 minutes of stealing it. Went outside, nobody was there, and then I heard my ex-wife screaming. Found out that my son was killed. It was life-changing. You're in shock. You've lost your son to a carjacking. Is it worth killing somebody over a car that you wrecked within 4 or 5 minutes of stealing? your life changed, and you're still trying to process. It's tough.
A process Leo is still going through. His son's homicide is unsolved.
I knew it happened, and I know to solve crimes, you have to try to get as much information as you can quickly.
A detective took on the case and it remains active, but Leo knew he would have to get involved himself for the best possible outcome.
I worked with the detective. I also got on the Nextdoor app in Old Louisville, and I pleaded with all the folks in Old Louisville to look at their cameras and just look for anything that happened that particular evening. Sometimes people don't want to get involved, but he was my son. These people that are dying, they have families, they belong to people, and you just can't sit there and crawl in your hole when you have information that could lead to the arrest of these people that are committing these horrendous crimes.
Across town, 1 week after Austin was killed, another young Louisvillian was killed in a carjacking. Nagdy, who went by Travis, is charismatic. He's energetic, a uniting force. Travis is loud, but his bullhorn, always in hand, made him heard.
Definitely early on, not the first protest, but it was pretty early on.
It's hard to remember my life beforehand because there's just been so much.
Found his purpose, and you couldn't pull him away from it.
He's an activist.
It's not a moment, it's definitely a movement.
A builder. He's a symbol. Travis Nagdy was compassionate and took to the streets to show it.
We're all just worried about everybody being safe. We just need people to be safe, or all of this was for nothing.
He was the sweetest kid, and me using the past tense is so weird now that he's not here, but of course his spirit is with me, but no mom wants to describe their kid in the past tense.
Late on Sunday night, Travis left the home he shared with his girlfriend and went to start his car to go to an all-hands-on-deck for protesters in the Louisville community. From FBI documents, we know Travis's girlfriend heard him fighting with the suspect, so she walked outside the home and towards the car, where on the driver's side, Travis and the carjacker continued to argue. Then, 3 gunshots. The carjacker hops in and takes off. Travis is left laying in the middle of the road, shot multiple times. His mom will never forget when the phone rang and she was told Travis had been shot.
I just would say that it was surreal when I got the call, and all I can say is God was with me, because I don't know how I held it together on that ride. I was trying to remain hopeful, like maybe he's shot in his arm or something. I guess you're trying to bargain and say, I'm gonna get there and it's not gonna be that bad. Because no one wants to hear of their child dying in such a violent way.
Travis Nagdy died at the hospital on November 23rd.
It's still new to me. Yeah, there's that initial shock of finding out, okay, them telling you the words that your son's dead, but processing that and not being able to say goodbye, not being able to go back in the hospital room or hold my child's hand. That was probably best to protect me, from what I would have seen, so that I can remember him as his beautiful soul that he was, and not what I would have seen that the doctor saw.
While doctors broke the news to his family and they prepared to bury their loved one, the investigation was just beginning. Police recovered Travis's white sedan wrecked into another car on Lynn Street in St. Joseph. When police searched the car, they found a pair of glasses on the dashboard. They didn't belong to Travis. Throughout the course of the next few weeks, police received tips from people in the community brave enough to come forward and help with this case. Those tips pointed them towards evidence until LMPD had enough to charge Ashton Nally with murder, robbery, and possession of a handgun by a felon. And the FBI announced Nally would also face federal carjacking charges. Now the family is waiting, trying to find out what happens next in the trial, sitting with their unbearable grief and constant heartbreak.
My son is still gone. I mean, yes, that's happy. Justice will be served. It's like someone took my heart. Because my heart hurts every time if I think about him.
The losses of Travis and Austin are heart-wrenching, but they're just 2 lives of the hundreds of carjacking victims in the past 2 years. Coming up, what police say ties these suspects together, why cars are being stolen and not sold.
We're not going away. We understand that this is a problem and it's continued to be a problem, and we're working specifically to stop the individuals who are committing these heinous crimes.
And what is driving teenagers to commit violent carjackings? Next. Between 2019 and 2020, carjackings shot up in Metro Louisville. I sat down with an FBI agent and LMPD investigators hoping to find any clues about why and who these criminals are. As the pandemic began in 2020,
remain calm and understand that we will get through this.
Our perspectives changed. People worked from home if they were lucky enough to work at all. Appreciation for simpler things increased, walks in the park, a great book. Life slowed down, but crime, violent crime in particular, shot up.
You know, this is something I never thought I would be dealing with. You know, these are things you hear about, read about, but you don't ever think it's going to impact your family.
In August of 2020, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, Louisville Metro Police Department, Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, Homeland Security Investigations, Kentucky State Police, and Jefferson County Sheriff's Office came together to hold a press conference, inviting media partners to share the message. No matter a criminal's age, they've been put on notice.
When they said the FBI was going to be more involved and they set up a task force here in Louisville, I was excited. I'm like, you know, finally we're going to get some more boots on the ground to try to you know, stop what's going on.
Some of the minors that are doing these crimes don't think that they could actually be charged in the federal system. I think they think that it just can't happen. That's not true.
Kids under the age of 18. Oftentimes, we can't even say their names on TV. They're protected by the law and breaking the law.
The prosecutors ultimately make the decision on whether or not to charge a minor or not to charge a minor in the federal system.
What could guide kids barely old enough to get a permit to violently rob someone of a car? I sat down with the FBI's Assistant Special Agent in Charge, Brian Jones, and 2 members of LMPD's robbery unit, Detective Matt Crouch and Sergeant Justin Stillwell.
So we are seeing some gang involvement, and many times the adults that are with them are also fairly young adults. Sometimes still teenagers. So we're seeing groups of individuals who all know each other. And we're seeing that a lot of the folks that are committing carjackings are also involved in other crimes. We've seen them involved in drive-by shootings, in just regular theft of vehicles, in business robberies. So we feel that, you know, going after these bad actors that are committing carjackings will also affect and hopefully lower just the general violent crime rates in the city.
September of 2021, when we took it over, that's when we really focused on it. But we have seen a lot of serial crews, multiple individuals working together to accomplish this, and then they will have done multiple carjackings and secondary offenses before getting caught by police and interviewed. A suspect takes a stolen vehicle, it's not registered to them, it's harder to track them. Obviously, they're not going to use their personal car for these large violent crimes, and so by getting a stolen vehicle, they're able to kind of be undetected for a little bit, and so I think that's the motivation behind it.
Young suspects using the crime of carjacking as a catalyst to other crimes, adding an extra layer to these investigations.
They're actually being detained and being held accountable for their actions. The suspects have told us they're extremely shocked that they're actually being detained and going to be held accountable. And a lot of those juveniles now that started back in September are being now treated as adults and have been indicted in Jefferson County Circuit Court.
The numbers are staggering.
In 2018, 101 people were victims of carjackings. In 2019, 81 reported carjackings in the entire year. Then in 2020, 211 people had their vehicles violently stripped from them in the city of Louisville, some of them dying in the process. 2021 brought about another record year. Carjacking spiked to 248. But one person who goes through the trauma of a carjacking is one too many. Coming up after the break, the problem is recognized. What police are doing federally that they say is already showing results.
Obviously, if a suspect is going to commit a carjacking at gunpoint, then there's several consequences that follow that.
But before that, a man so impacted by the stories, he's created his own self-defense course specifically for carjacking. He's showing you what to do if you're a target by pretending he's the criminal.
While police chase these criminals using evidence to track them, one Louisville man is focused on people like you who might want to be prepared when they learn the answers to where and when. Okay. So you redirect, bottom,
grab it.
bang, 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 like that.
That's it.
Inside the Mid-City Mall off Bardstown Road, Rough Hands owner Jesse Walker is preparing for his favorite seminar to instruct. He's a self-defense expert, focusing on stressful situations, mass shootings, attempted assaults, carjackings.
Compliance works. Often, not always. But there are times where fighting is appropriate.
Just like law enforcement said, comply and hand over your car or your property. But Jesse also recognizes situations where just handing over the keys isn't an option.
I'm not letting that person drive away with my kid. So that is a very hard line for me. And that's one of the things we talk about. My criteria and my lines, my red lines may be different than yours. That's not stuff that you need to figure out the day of. You need to be thinking about, okay, what am I willing to fight for? What am I willing to not fight for?
In his carjacking prevention seminar, Walker creates high-stress scenarios complete with a gun in your face to help create the muscle memory to react and fight if one of your hard lines is crossed.
Most of us as citizens can't stop carjacking, right? We don't really have any power. We don't have any levers to pull to be like, stop this, make these numbers go down. But we do have control over ourselves and our own training, so that even though we don't necessarily reduce the chances of it happening, we are more prepared for it if something were to happen. There's a lot of frustration out in the world, you know, the pandemic, locally, the protests. There is a part of me that really empathizes with some of the anger, some of the desperation, but this is not the solution. We're not moving the ball forward by terrorizing everybody, you know, with these carjackings.
Through our reporting, we found many of the criminals in these violent, traumatizing incidents are under the age of 18. In 2020, 211 carjackings total. 74 of those cases are closed, and 47 of the people arrested are under the age of 18. In 2021, only 79 cases of the 248 carjackings are cleared, and more than half of those closed cases, 55 arrests, were teenagers. So far in 2022, 72 reported carjackings in Louisville, 27 arrests, 19 of them minors. This is a cold-blooded crime, sparking emotional reactions from law enforcement in our community.
It's shocking to me the number of carjackings that started in 2020. And I think that as a law enforcement officer in the community, we're seeing them so often, and we're very excited that the numbers are going down. But we have a long way to go in trying to reduce the number of carjackings. They're still elevated much higher than what they should be. Our ultimate goal is to have zero carjackings. So we have a long way to go. We have a lot of work to do still.
It is frustrating that a carjacking or stolen vehicle is the foundation or the starting point to these heinous crimes that are being committed afterwards. I think that's one reason that the chief was able to observe the issue with carjackings and see the secondary offenses, and that's why she took the initiative to put us on it and have us focus on those crimes.
It's a good feeling to know that you're actually helping somebody out. Victims that are not victims of their own life choices and circumstances, that these are victims that are out just trying to go day to day, and you're actually helping someone out that is a true victim.
To bring justice to the victims, now they warn, just because you're underage doesn't mean you'll be treated differently. Federal agents are bringing federal carjacking charges, even to some of the younger offenders.
I think the word is getting out that we've started this and we're taking that approach, and people are starting to reconsider their actions because they know what's coming.
The FBI is investigating these cases hand in hand with LMPD, and that there is a chance that you could be charged federally if you're involved in violent carjackings. So in the federal system, there's no probation and there's no parole. So generally, the best that a federal defendant can do is serve, they can get about 15% off their time. So they could serve, at best, they're going to serve up to 85% of whatever their federal sentence is.
We're not going to stand by and stand idle because not only are these kids affecting these victims, my kids are not going to school with some of these offenders. I don't want my kids growing up in that type of community. I don't want other people's kids growing up in that type of community with these type of individuals that do not see a problem with the crimes that they're committing, and that the other detectives in our office, investigators in our office, are not going to stand idle and let cases go on by. That this is our primary focus right now, and that we're not going to stop till we complete the thorough investigation.
The suspects in this story are innocent until proven guilty. To rewatch the story or share it, you can find it on our website, WHAS11.com.